All right, good morning, everyone. Surviving the second day. So, this is the time where everyone's energy is at its peak before calming down throughout the day until the evening. So, we are going to continue from yesterday's talk. And I'd like to begin with how Buddhism began because it will tie to the Abhidharma tradition. So, if we look at this question, there are two major routes of the spreading of Buddhism in India, north and south. And it determines and shaped Buddhism today. In other words, all kinds of Buddhism we see today can be traced back to these two routes, as you can see on the map. By location, we have East Asia, China, Korea, Japan, and also Vietnam or Northern Buddhism, South and Southeast Asia like Sri Lanka, Thailand, Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore are all Southern Buddhism. So this is to speak in a general sense. In reality, all forms of Buddhism, Northern and Southern, now both exist around the world, not specific to a particular country. So now Gandhara is particularly interesting because it was the major hub of Buddhism in northwestern India before it spread to the east. And it shapes the doctrine and practice of the so-called Northern Buddhism today, particularly in China. So before Buddhism spread to China, there is a middle point. It's not directly went from India to China, but from India to Gandhara first, and then to China and throughout the East Asia. So where is this place Gandhara? Gandhara is an ancient name, which is today's northwestern Pakistan, northeastern Afghanistan border place. So if you look at the map, this is India down here, and then up to the northwestern part of the India, which is the ancient times also a part of India, although today it's totally different countries. That's Gandhara. So it's close to the Himalayan mountain range, very good weather, especially very conducive for meditation. And it was a major hub for all the scholastic traditions, all the Abhidharma traditions arose at this place at this particular time frame around the first century BCE to the third century CE. Right. So this is the sample of Gandhari manuscript content. A lot of Buddhist manuscripts also were dug up at this location, particularly written using the Gandhari language or Kharosthi script. So if we look at the Gandhari Dharmapada, everyone knows Dharmapada, right? It's a very famous Buddhist text and very basic, and it's also known in all traditions. Right. Also, it's known as the basic Buddhist teaching for the novice and newcomers. Written in verses, acts as a Buddhist aphorism that teaches about morality and ethics. So, if we read these verses from Gandhari Dharmapada, the content is basically the same as the Chinese Dharmapada, the Pali Dharmapada, and Sanskrit Dharmapada. Only the arrangement and the minor differences in it. So it says one should not think little of merit, thinking that will not come to me. With the falling of the drops of water, even the water pot is filled. A wise man is filled with merit, practicing it even a little. So we see again and again, is there a Buddhist nature or Buddhist characteristic in it if I don't tell you the source? Yes, it is, right? Especially the notion of merit. And then also we see in the text this trope by using a simile or metaphor again and again throughout the text, particularly from the Gandhara region, right? We can know for sure this is from Gandhara because it's in the form of the manuscript. This is the real thing, as you can see in the picture. Usually, a lot of Buddhist text or sutra that we see today is not material wise it's not a real thing, but I don't mean the teaching is not real, but I mean the book is modern printed edition. But this one is kind of the real thing that we found under the ground, buried for several thousand years, and then now it's come up. And from this verse, we learn that never underestimate a little thing, a little kindness, or even a little bad thing. And always start with a little good thing every single day, such as meditate for 1 minute, read one sentence of the sutra, listen to the Dharma talk for 2 minutes if you can only focus for 2 minutes and the rest is just sleeping, and so on and so forth. So everything takes time and everything always begins with simple step like a baby step. Our lives today all start with a single step, a simple word when we were baby, and a single breath, of course. So from this, we learn to be humble, we learn to overcome pride, and we learn to focus our own single goodness every single day, right? So moving on to the periods of Indian Buddhism, I know you've seen this a lot of times. So we have three major divisions. The first one is early Buddhism, and then Mahayana Buddhism, and then esoteric Buddhism or Tantrayana Buddhism or Tantric Buddhism. So within the early Buddhism period, this is the period that we're going to focus on this series talk. So it's further divided into two. The first one is original Buddhism, although there is nothing as original as you know. And there is this sectarian Buddhism. So in the original Buddhism, we have Sutra and Vinaya, right? Although Sutra and Vinaya are placed within the original Buddhism as they are supposed to be, the Sutra and Vinaya canons that we have today are all the product of sectarian Buddhism, which is the second division under the early Buddhism. In other words, they are meant to be the original words of the Buddha. However, the written versions that we have today are all the product of sectarian Buddhism. So you all know the history already. And on a practical level, it doesn't matter because whether it's original or not, because the content is still true to the Buddhist teachings. And Abhidharma, on the other hand, is explicitly and exclusively a product of a sectarian Buddhism. On a practical level, the content may differ, diverge, develop, or alter from the teachings in the sutra. That's why we see the debate, the challenging of all the notions that we read in the sutra, right? So if you look at early Buddhism canon, we have sutra. What is sutra? Basically, it's the profound nature of reality that the Buddha realized under the Bodhi tree, and which he skillfully taught in ways suited to sentient beings. And what is Vinaya? Vinaya is the rules and regulations established by the Buddha for his monastic disciples to form the Sangha. So, what matters for lay people is usually just the sutra, although part of the Vinaya might be useful for the practice as well. And the Sutra and Vinaya collections originate from the Buddha's spoken teachings and institutional creations, and were gradually compiled by his disciples during the first and second Sangha Council in India. The existing versions of the Sutra and Vinaya have undergone revisions and additions over time. Their language and meaning show considerable variation, marked by strong sectarian characteristics. In both form and content, they are largely still the same. This is a point acknowledged by all schools, and so it can be concluded that they were compiled prior to the division of the schools, that is before or around 300 BCE. So, speaking of sutra, how many sutras have you read? What are they? Can you name title and the content? Maybe you've known a lot of sutras, but not as much in terms of Abhidharma. right? So now we shift gear to the Abhidharma, right? Abhidharma, it has many meanings, but in terms of language wise, Abhi, the prefix, and Dharma means about the Dharma. This is the first definition. The second definition, which is more popular one, is the higher Dharma. Abhi means higher, and Dharma means the teaching of the Buddha. So it is a scholastic analysis and codification of the doctrines of the Dharma as taught by the Buddha in the Sutra. So we must have the Sutra first, and a lot of blurry gray areas in the Sutra are further explained in the Abhidharma. That's why we have this higher level of teaching in the Abhidharma. The language might seem hard to understand because, scholastic tradition. It has a lot of technical terms in it. And the situation of the Abhidharma Pitaka differs from that of the Sutra and Vinaya Pitaka. The Abhidharma is based on the compiled sutra as its object and works by analyzing and systemizing them. Pali Abhidharma is believed to be taught by the Buddha, consisting of detailed, systematized teachings that are not explicitly stated in the sutras. It is associated with the Theravada or Southern tradition. And Chinese treatise, or Lun, is an encyclopedic collection of systematic philosophical exposition. There are authors for this treatise. It is mainly associated with the Northern tradition. So now you see the difference between Southern and Northern Abhidharma. Southern Abhidharma believes that they were taught by the Buddha himself during the Buddha's visit in heaven. But the Northern Abhidharma is for sure the work of the Buddha's disciples. So they're authors for this kind of works. It's not the teaching spoken literally by the Buddha. And if we compare the sutra and Abhidharma or treatise, we can see that while the sutras were spoken in response to specific situations, the treatise or sastra or Abhidharma are analytical discussions of specific subjects. Sutras present teaching one by one, tailored to specific audiences. Treatises examine each doctrinal point in detail. Sutras emphasize adaptive responses to circumstances. Treatises emphasize universal truths. Sutras take the form of discourses, questions and answers spoken by the Buddha and the great disciples, and thus were broadly respected within the Sangha. Treatises, on the other hand, are composed by the Buddha's disciple, and due to the differences in sectarian transmission, inevitably involve mutual critique and commentary. So we can see and will see a lot of debates within the Abhidharma. So why was Abhidharma invented? Well, first, we can see the tradition of analytical discussion and doctrinal debate dated back to the Buddha himself. However, analytical exposition alone would not have produced the unique style of Abhidharma treatises. I will show you by examples what this all means. But first, we see the factual points first. The vast body of the sutras often appears overly complex or disorderly due to the slight variations. Some may be too concise to convey clear meaning, or because they were delivered to different audiences and passed down through varied transmission, they may seem contradictory. So, faced with such a body of teachings, it became necessary to simplify, clarify, and systematize them. This gave rise to the work of organizing, analyzing, selecting, structuring, and elaborating upon the Dharma. Um, so the goal was to distill complexity into clarity, proceed from the superficial to the profound, comprehensively encompass the entire Dharma and discern its true meaning so that the principles and practices of the Dharma might become orderly and readily understood. Abhidharma is the product of sectarian Buddhism. So we now know that the Dharma originates from the Buddha's own direct realization. And from this realization, the Buddha exercised his great transformative activity through body, speech, and mind, manifesting concretely in the Sangha and influencing the society, thereby becoming the human-centered awakening tradition. The concrete Buddhist activities carried out during the Buddha's 45 years of teaching form the very source of all subsequent expressions of the Dharma. To understand the Dharma, one must see in terms of this ongoing continuity and expansion. It cannot be understood in isolation or in a fragmentary, one-sided way based merely on one moment or one aspect, as if that alone were true nature of the Dharma. This kind of linked to yesterday's 8 introductory points. In the continuation and expansion of the Dharma, sectarian Buddhism holds significant importance. The sectarian period of Buddhism, or in other words, Abhidharma works, stands as a transitional phase. It inherits the unified Dharma of the earlier period and paves the way for the rise of Mahayana. So if you wonder why is the teaching in Mahayana Sutra differ from the teaching, let's say, in the Pali Canon, so to find the missing link between these two vastly great varied teaching, we have to look into the Abhidharma or within this middle period among the early Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism. So the Abhidharma treatises are surely products of the sectarian period. In this process of transmission and transformation, connecting what came before and opening up what followed, they played an important role in possessing enduring value. So now we are moving to the seventh book of Abhidharma. So at the very beginning, I mentioned that there are two routes of the spreading of Buddhism, right? The north and south. So we begin by the southern seven books of Abhidharma. These are the seven. You just need to know the name. You don't have to memorize it. There are these seven. Dhamma Sangani, Vibhanga, Dhatudatta, Puggala Panyati, Yammaka, Patana, Tawatu. These are all in Pali language. Anyone knows any single book out of the seven? Have you all heard about this? No? What about Abhidhammata Sangaha on the right side here? No one know? What about this Visuddhimagga, the path of purification? I think this is the most famous one. So, what is the basis for meditation technique practice or taught today? A lot of the times it based on Visuddhimagga or the path of purification or the manual of meditation from the southern tradition. And this Abhidhammata Sangaha is the compilation or summary or essence of all seven books of Abhidharma from the southern tradition. Usually when people say Abhidharma, I study Abhidharma, I learn Abhidharma, they refer to this Abhidhammata Sangaha. But now you know Abhidharma is not only one single book from one single tradition. Within one single tradition, southern tradition, they have seven books, right? And now we're going to move on the northern tradition. This is the focus of our talk in this retreat. We are not going to look at the southern tradition, but we are going to look at the northern tradition. There are these seven books. And why are there Chinese here? Because all northern Abhidharma books survive only in Chinese translation, which some still have the fragmentary of its Indic manuscript. And from these seven books, we have Vibhasa, which is a continuity of the seven book. And then we have at the very latest stage Abhidharma Kosha Bhashya, which is the most famous book in the northern tradition. It holds a position equal to Abhidhamma Sanghaha from the Southern tradition. It consists of the essence of Northern tradition Abhidharma, although not necessarily a compilation of the seven books, because even within the same Northern tradition, their point of view differs vastly. So we can't see any single unified view among all these seven books. All are different, right? Some say that only present exists. Some say past, present, and future, everything exists. That the term that you all learned yesterday. Do you still remember what's the term for everything exists? The Sanskrit term? Sarvastivadin, right? Sarvastivada, the one who speaks everything exists. All right. So if you look at these schools of Buddhism, it's very complicated, but you don't have to know about all of this, just an overview for you. If you look at the very left side on that red box, we have at the very beginning only two major schools. The first one being Staviravada, and the second one being Mahasangika, which is not in this table, right? Because we are only focusing on one school. And within that very left, one single school, it then further divided, broke down into several other sectarian schools, as you can see. But then on the very right side, you can see that we have the green one, the seven northern books, and then the blue one, which is the Shariputra Abhidharma, and then the purple one, the seven southern books. The green and blue are northern traditions, whereas the purple one is the southern tradition. And we'll only discuss the northern, which is the seven northern books and the Sariputra Abhidharma, which will be tomorrow. And today we are going to focus on the seven, but not all the seven, just the nutshell. All right. The character of Abhidharma. Okay, so now we are getting into the weeds. Get ready. Please fasten your seatbelts. Raise any questions if you have in the middle, or jot down some notes to be asked at the end. So Abhidharma, as I said earlier, it can mean two things. The first one is Abhi means highest or higher, further, and Dharma is always the teaching or the doctrine. So Abhidharma can mean the highest teaching, or Abhi can mean with regard to. So with regard to the teaching. And the selection of the definition differ because of the different tradition as well. The Southern tradition or the Pali tradition prefers the higher Dharma. That's why if you have teacher from the Theravada tradition, they likes to explain it as the Abhidharma is the highest Dharma, the highest teaching. But if you study from the Northern tradition, which is very, very few teachers teach it today, you'll see the definition of Abhidharma is with regard to the teaching. So, for example, in Mahavibhasa, Mahavibhasa is one of not among the seven books of Abhidharma, but from a later tradition, which is very popular and very large volume. It says that Abhidharma enables one to discriminate and analyze factors according to their generic or particular inherent characteristic. None of this single word is English. It's English, but when putting it together, no one can understand it because every single word is technical term. For example, what is to discriminate and analyze? It's similar to English definition, but it's really technical in terms of vipassana during the meditation practice. What is factors? I put in brackets dharma. So the definition of dharma also shifts here. The dharma not only means the teaching of the Buddha, but it becomes a factors. Like the question that you asked yesterday, what is phenomena? What is factors? These all can be said in one single word, which is dharma. That's why the Indic or the Sanskrit term dharma sometimes cannot bring about or cover all the definitions in English. Like the connotation is kind of different, right? That's why we have to explicate and explain it further and further. And then we also have generic and particular inherent characteristics. We will talk about this later as we go on. And then the second one is Abhidharma enables one to suppress non-Buddhist doctrines and establish the true teaching. So we can see already the Abhidharma within its historical period, they exist contemporary with other sects of teachings. That's why it involves a lot of debates within the internal Buddhist institution as well as external with other sects from the India religions. Abhidharma also enables one to remove defilements and progress along the path. So this is a very practical, important reason to study Abhidharma because it can be as a tool to remove defilements. And then if we see Vasubandhu, this is a person's name, which is the author of Abhidharma Kosa, a very famous Abhidharma in Northern tradition. It says Abhidharma is discrete factor that is directed toward the ultimate factor or nirvana or toward the characteristics of individual factors. So this, the words in bold, directed toward is uh, this meaning with regard to. So Abhidharma, the practice or the factor that is directed toward all phenomena. So as you're sitting down listening to the teaching right now, a lot of mental activity is happening at the moment, right? So only if only you know what kinds of mental factors are there in our mind, in our body, we can see it clearly, right? So the first thing is to know what are the factors. The function of Abhidharma, in one of the 7 books of Abhidharma, it says Abhidharma functions as the pure eye within the mind or as the basis of knowledge, like the sun illuminating the forest of all of things to be known, or like the sword that destroys heretical texts. Do you see a special trope again in this sentence? Simile or metaphor. I'll point out to simile and metaphor again and again throughout my thought. So if you look at I, the pure I is the thing. This is the metaphor, right? It functions as the pure I within the mind. So the I here is a simile for what? Abhidharma. The Abhidharma teaching is like the I, to see everything. So the everything, the object of seeing is the dharma, is the factors. And then the second simile is the sun. The sun here is like abhidharma as well. And the forest of things to be known is the dharma. So abhidharma can be understood in this kind of simile or metaphor. And then abhidharma is also a tool or requisite condition that furthers religious praxis. It is neither the primary cause of religious attainment nor an end in itself. Aside from the investigation of factors, there is no means by which defilements are extinguished. And through defilements, the world is lost in the ocean of rebirth. Very beautiful verse, isn't it? So we need Abhidharma, right, as a means to extinguish, to remove defilements, because these defilements is what causes us all to be lost in the ocean of rebirth. Do you see a special trope again in this verse? Yes, we have a metaphor again. What is the metaphor? The one in blue, ocean. right? The ocean here is equated to the samsara, or the cycle of life and rebirth. And extinguished is also a kind of metaphor. When I say the word extinguish, what kind of image or picture pop up in your mind? Fire, right? So here, when we say extinguished and then the picture of fire appears, it means that defilement is like a fire. And the removal of defilements is called extinguished, right? So in Buddhist literature, we have a lot of overlapping similes and metaphors. You have to be aware of that because sometimes ocean can mean bad things, such as the ocean of samsara, but ocean can mean good things too, such as when we refer to the stream enterer. Why is the stream enterer called the stream enterer? What's to do with the stream? Where does the stream lead to at the end? For example, when we say a river stream, where does this stream lead to in the end? Ocean, right? So the stream enterer means the ocean here means the good thing, which is first, when we attain the first stage of sage, meaning the stream enterer, we are like stepping into the stream of the river. And then following along the river, we attain the second attainment, the third attainment, and then the Arahant is like emerge with the ocean. And ocean here means good thing, Arahantship. Any question?
Peter, the Buddha used another simile frequently when he referred to the tears of
Yes.
beings becoming either a river or an ocean.
Yeah, yeah, right. So that's why I say water or ocean can mean good thing and bad thing as well, depending on the context. So the context matters. Okay, so now what is the origin of Abhidharma text? Why is there suddenly Abhidharma? Right? In the very beginning, before Abhidharma, if we imagine, if we travel back to the past, we already have the sutra. We already have the Buddha's teaching. Why did the disciples of the Buddha need to compose this kind of complex, right, teaching? Well, first, we can see, is the origin of Dharma come from matrika or categorizing list? Matrika is the Sanskrit term. It means the matrix or the list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is it the origin of Abhidharma? Is Abhidharma only about listing a set of categories? Or does it come from Abhidharma Katha, meaning the dialogues concerning doctrine or catechetical style, Q&A style, because there is question and answer going on, and then it becomes Abhidharma? Well, the short answer for you is neither of these is the origin of Abhidharma, because Abhidharma is not just about listing and it's not just about Q&A. Listing and Q&A had already been in the sutras at the very first place. So there's no need to make another canon of Abhidharma. So what is matrika? Matrika literally means mother text or root matrices or outlines or categorizing lists. So it can be in the two forms. The first one is numerical arrangement, and the second one is in topical arrangement. So already we can see in the Pali Canon, for example, Anguttara Nikaya, if you're familiar with it, it's arranged based on the numerical arrangement. So when we open Anguttara Nikaya today, it starts with the first book. The first chapter contains all the dharmas with only one. What is one dharma in in Buddhism? For example, all sentient beings depend on food to survive. So one dharma is food. The second chapter is about the two dharmas. What are the two dharmas? And then three, and then four, and then five, up to 11. And then in the Samyutta Nikaya, a lot of the arrangement is arranged based on topic. So that's why it's called topical arrangement. So although it marks the formation of Abhidharma, it still represents only the far origin of Abhidharma. Abhidharma specifically refers to the period of sectarian Buddhism. Matrika lacked any sectarian affiliation and were acknowledged by all schools. So this is not the origin of Abhidharma, although it informed the formation stage of Abhidharma. So what is Abhidharma? What makes Abhidharma different from Sutra and Vinaya? This is very important because the fundamental topics of Abhidharma inquiry are specific characteristics, swalakshana, right? Universal characteristics, inclusion, association, and conditionality. Notice that we are very, very unfamiliar with these terms because they are not in the sutra. So already we can see something unique in the Abhidharma. Even in the process of learning Buddhism, sometimes, and a lot of the times even, we are not learning it directly from the sutra. A lot of the teachings are Abhidharma in its origin already. So if you look at, this is the sample of overview of the Samyutta Nikaya. It's arranged based on topical arrangement. We have the group of linked discourses with verses. It's grouped based on the verses. We have the group of linked discourses beginning with causation. And then we have also chapters about aggregates, chapters about six sense fields, and chapters about the past. This is kind of the topical arrangement. Okay, about the second origin, possible origin of Abhidharma. What is Abhidharma Katha? It is doctrinal discussion and centers on the Noble Path, such as the four foundations of mindfulness and the Noble Eightfold Path, and are analyzed and discussed systematically. It seems like Abhidharma, but it's not. So, some examples about Abhidharma Katha we can see. For example, in the Mahagosinga Sutta in Majjhima Nikaya, there's a question and answers between a monk and Mahamoggallana. Is that what you're going to read tonight about the chief disciple? Still on Sariputra. Okay. Okay, sure. Yeah, so at least you know these figures, one of the chief disciples of the Buddha. So there's this Q&A going on, and we jump right in the middle of the conversation. Sariputra says, Ananda, the Salt Forest Park at Gosinga is lovely. So Gosinga is a park name. You don't have to worry about that. It's a proper name. The night is bright, the salt trees are in full blossom, and heavenly scents seem to float on the air. What kind of mendicant or monk would beautify this park? So the answer provided by Rivata is it's a mendicant who enjoys retreat and loves retreat that beautify this part. They're committed to inner serenity of the heart. They don't neglect absorption or meditative experience. They're endowed with discernment and they frequent empty huts. So do you all love retreats and enjoy retreat? Because if you do, you'll beautify this temple even more. And Mahamoggallana at the end says, so one question and a lot of answers provided by different disciples. So you can pick either one that you like because the core question here is the night is bright, right? The salt tree are in full blossoms. What kind of people, what kind of disciple would beautify this park? So the answer provided by Mahamoggallana is it's when two monks engage in discussion about the teaching. They question each other and answer each other's question without faltering, and your discussion on the teaching flows on. So as long as there is Q&A about the teachings going on in this temple, the temple becomes very shiny and bright. Okay, another sample from Gandhari manuscript again also can be found in Majjhima Nikaya. The Buddha says, I hope to monks, I hope you are keeping well and eat well. Very, you know, intimate. I hope you are living in harmony, appreciating each other without quarreling, blending like milk and water, and regarding each other with kindly eyes. Question mark. Do you see the special trope again? What's the simile? Like milk and water. This occurs a lot in especially Vinaya texts because in Vinaya texts it emphasizes a lot on the harmony within the Sangha. On a very practical and realistic level, a lot of monastic living together in a Sangha, in the temple, for example, quarreling oftentimes happen as a matter of fact, envy, jealousy, fighting with each other. Of course, on the ideal level, we often idealize that monks should be live in peace, doing their own thing. But in real life, it's not really the case, right? People quarrel a lot even during the Buddha time. You can read a lot of the story related to this kind of issue. So this kind of simile is brought about to kind of illustrate or illuminate what living in a community of monks and nuns should be. They should be in harmony, right? Like the blending of milk and water. So we have the picture immediately when we pour milk into water or water into milk. Which one do you usually do? Do we pour milk into water or water into milk? Okay, I don't pour anything into the milk. So Anuruddha says, yes, we are. The Buddha asks how. Anuruddha, etc., right, says, whoever returns first from alms round, prepares the seats, and puts out the drinking water and the rubbish bin. If someone sees that the pot of water for washing, drinking, or toilets empty, they set it up. And every 5 days, we sit together for the whole night and discuss the teachings. So this is what um, monks and nuns should be doing, although it's not necessarily the case. So we have this, even in Christianity, we have this principle of embarrassment in the text. If we see in the text, such as prescription, that the Buddha tells us, you ought not to do this, you ought not to do that, meaning on the ground level at that time, it really happened. Does it make sense to you? So when I tell you, don't be lazy, it means that you've already been lazy in the first time, so that I have to say you. If you are not lazy at all, there's no reason that I say this to you, right? It's the same thing. The fact that whoever returns first from alms rounds, prepare the seats and put the drinking water in the rubbish bin, been said by Anuruddha, etc., meaning it didn't happen in the first place. People are just thinking very selfish on their own matter. They get their food, they eat, and then they leave without doing anything. But then Anuruddha, etc., prescribe this kind of practice will make everybody happy in the community, especially we are living in a retreat environment at the moment. And it's very important if we can practice this together, right? Any questions? Okay, if there's no question, I'll just pause it here first and we'll continue in the afternoon.